Well, we are continuing this morning in our summer series called Can I Get a Witness, where we are hearing testimonies from people in our congregation. And this morning, we get to hear from Loretta Walquist. So Loretta, why don't you come on up and join me? Brian, our all-star stagehand today, and our drummer. Thank you, Brian. Give this to you, Loretta. Well, Loretta told me she didn't think that she had much to say this morning, and I frankly disagree. And I think you'll disagree with me too by the time we get through with all of this. So, Loretta, you are a familiar face to many of us here. Some have known you for years. Others recognize you from the times that you have prayed up here at the front, or maybe taught their kids in Kids Park. So let's start by having you tell us how many years you've been coming to Waite Park.
Well, I remember the date because it was after our first child was born, Cindy, and my husband thought, he was at a job where he was gone a lot during the week. Is this on?
Mm-hmm, it is.
Okay. And it was in 1967.
Ooh, can anyone beat that? Who was here before 1967? A few.
Yeah,
okay, Carrie Jo.
Not too many.
Are born around here.
Well, my husband just felt like this job takes me away all week. He was a student recruiter for Bartlesville, and he felt like that's not the job. I need to be there for our family. So that's when we ended up somewhere else.
So 1967, so your husband, Dick, was connected to Waite Park Church. In fact, Dick was born in this church, correct? And his parents, George and Millie, were founding members. I think we actually have a picture that some of you might have seen of our congregation way back in the day. And I think, is that Millie front left? Yes. Okay, so front left, that's Millie.
Millie and George.
Millie and George. Okay, so Loretta has some deep, deep roots here at Waite Park Church. So you had your husband, Dick, and then how many kids?
4 daughters.
4 daughters, and you have a couple of them today. If you are connected to Miss Loretta, go ahead and wave your hand. All of you Hansons and Walquists who love to have the spotlight put on you. Yep, there you go. We even have Nathaniel in the tech booth. I told Nathaniel we don't have to give any direction to the PowerPoint today because he knows all the people and all the pictures that I have to show. Okay, so you've got 2 kids here. Where are the other 2? What are their names?
The other 2 are in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. They went to college there and felt like that was a good place to raise their children, so they ended up there. So I have 11 grandkids. They're all grown and married and have their own families. So I just had my 18th great-grandchild.
Woo! I'm amazed you can keep count.
Well, I keep count, but I don't keep names.
We need name tags at the Walquist family reunion. All right, so let's rewind back to your childhood years, because you aren't from here in Minnesota. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your childhood? Where were you born? How many siblings do you have? What was life at home like?
Well, I was born in Nebraska, where there's not much to do there. I don't know if you've watched the commercials on Nebraska, but some of them, one of them ends with, "But Nebraska isn't for everybody." I said, that's not a very good commercial. Anyway.
Let's not offend the Nebraskans in the house. It's fine.
And I grew up, now my mother and dad loved me very much. There was love in the family, but my mother never showed much emotion. And as I talked to my brother, and I've forgotten a lot of things in my childhood, but my brother says that he never heard my mother say, "I love you." And there was a lot of confusion in the house. And I said when I got married, I would never have that kind of family. Hopefully we would love one another. And of course, siblings don't always do that, but... So, where do I go from here? I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and my mother divorced when I was about 2, so I really didn't know my real father, my biological father. and I really didn't want to. I don't know why, because I heard, he was drinking, he was a womanizer, and it just wasn't a good situation. So they got a divorce, and years later, I don't know how many years it was, my mother remarried, and I just call this person my dad because he raised us, loved us, and was very good to us. So if I say dad, I'm talking about my stepfather, who never adopted us, but loved us very much and took care of us. So I remember after we let's see, where do I want to go?
Well, you moved from Nebraska
We moved
to
eventually to
Washington.
Yeah, Washington. I told this story to her.
I took good notes. I told you I'd be here for you, Loretta.
We lived in Wenatchee, Washington, and Leavenworth, Washington for I don't know how many years, and I had friends there, and it was good. It was tiny. In Leavenworth, there was a tiny, tiny little house. I don't know how we ever made it, but we did. And you make do with what you have. I think you probably know that. Mm-hmm. Well, from Washington, my dad was on the railroad, Great Northern Railroad, and he lost his job. I think it just disbanded. And so my grandfather said, if you come to Nebraska, I will give you a job. Now, some of you know this, but my grandfather, he was the best. He had a potato chip factory.
Okay, I knew that these were Loretta's favorite snacks. I knew she loved potato chips, but I didn't know it was because her grandfather had a whole factory. So let's pause just a moment, indulge us. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to work at a potato chip factory.
Oh, you eat a lot.
Sounds great. I'd love to work there.
No, and my grandfather, when I got older, would always let us come and work in the factory. You see these potato chips, the process is going, they wash them, get all the starch out, then they go through a slicer, and then they come down this wonderful conveyor, and that's where you eat them.
Hot and fresh. I can't imagine a better job.
we had the job of taking out the ones that weren't quite cooked and the ones that were too brown. And then people would come and actually buy those for almost nothing. So it was fun. I loved my grandfather and the potato. And when our children got older, they came to the factory and had a lot of fun also.
And a lot of chips, I'm sure. All right, so you moved back to Nebraska, and your family went to a church, but you found yourself at a Wesleyan church with some of your friends. So tell us about some of the ways that you were involved in serving your church and your community in those years.
I don't know why my parents were Baptists, and I don't know why I had a really good friend that I knew that lived there in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and I asked my mother if I could go to their church. Their father was a pastor and pioneering this church in Scottsbluff, and they said, yes, you can go. So I really ended up in the Wesleyan church. I remember going to jail services. I loved to sing. And they had 2 daughters and 2 sons. And we made up a trio, and we would go to this jail service and sing and give testimonies. And that was quite an experience. I think I must have been in high school when we did this. And I was in the youth group. We had a very good youth group and had a lot of fun together. We made up our own programs. I don't think we functioned like the youth groups do today, but we had officers. I don't remember what officer I was, but we planned our own programs and our own fun, and I grew up with this kind of a activity.
Yeah.
And the church was my life. I mean, I was there all the time. Yeah. I had other friends, too, that weren't Christian, but... Yeah.
Okay, so eventually you ended up in Miltonvale, Kansas. So I want you to tell us about what brought you there and how old you were when you went. You told me this was a small town, and I can confirm because I looked this up on the internet. To this day, the total population of Milton Vale is 440 people. So how did you end up in Milton Vale?
Well, at that time, we had a elementary school. And so when I was a senior, my friend was going to go there for her last year of high school. Yeah. And my mother, they really didn't want me to go. But I don't know if somehow I convinced them that it would be good for me.
How many of you would have been easily swayed on letting your high school senior just go to another state? Not me. This is amazing to me. Okay, so you went there, and at the Milton Vale Junior College, there were some people finishing high school, and then there were some people starting college there, correct? Okay, so pastor's daughter invites you to go there together, and that's where you met Dick. So tell us the story of how you met Dick and started to date.
Well, I think it was a God thing. When I went to Milton Vale, I was involved with another fellow. And I had his class ring, and really we were going to get married. But he didn't want me to go because he thought what happened really was going to happen. But I went anyway. And that's when I met Dick. I think I had one date with another person. And then Dick quickly, before I even had that date, Dick came up and asked me, will you go out with me? And there was no place really to go out. We had a favorite place that they had, what is it Wendy has? Frosties, yeah. That was a favorite thing to go on when you were with a date. And so that's where we usually went.
So Dick just walked up to you and asked you out.
He did.
It wasn't a slow boil of being in the same friend group and doing things. He just walked up and asked.
He just walked up and asked. And
Amazing.
I don't know why. I said yes.
And the rest is history.
Yes.
All right, so you and Dick fell in love. You got engaged. Where did life take you from there?
From Miltonville, I went my senior year of high school and 1 year of college, and he graduated in the junior college. So he had 2 years. We said to ourselves, then I went back to Nebraska, and we said, you need to graduate, finish your school. So we went to Marion College, which is another one of our colleges in Indiana, but it didn't work out for him. So he came back home. He stayed with some friends in the district, and somehow the state college he just couldn't make it. So he came back to Minnesota, and after 2 years, we decided to get married. And we ended up after that in Marion, and he worked for the college for 2 years, and that's when Cindy was born.
Which brought you back here to Minnesota.
Brought me back to Minnesota.
And so when you moved back to Minnesota, you stayed with Dick's family in their house on Silver Lane. So if you've ever been to a baptism service at Waite Park to Loretta's home on Silver Lane, that was George and Millie's house. So that's been a Walquist home for a very, very long time. So when you married Dick, you gained a new family, George and Millie and all the other Walquists. So what was different about Dick's family? What stood out to you about them?
They were, and I hope I don't cry, because they were the best in-laws anyone could ever have. And if you knew Millie and George, you would say the same thing. It was nothing like my family. There was love there, and Millie would always say, you're the best. I don't like to call you a daughter-in-law. I just like to think of you as a daughter. And she was great. And of course, this would be their only grandkids, the four girls. So there was much love. And we were at that lake all the time as the girls were growing up. The youth group came over there. We shared, Millie and George always had somebody in their home. And I had to do the same thing because Dick grew up with it, and we had people in our home all the time also. And it was great. People from the district. Sometimes somebody would come to our visiting, and Dick would just, of course, I think he asked me first. I'm not sure. But
Hopefully.
he would come to these people and say, do you have any place to go? Why don't you come and join us for dinner? And a lot of times they had no plans, and we were able to fellowship and help these new people, whether they stayed or were just visiting. I just kind of went into that mode of the family, and we loved people, and we loved helping. I loved being a homemaker, and I think I was at home for 17 years with when our firstborn went to college. I think that's when I decided, or Dick decided, that I should go back to work. But you know, it really scared me because I think electric typewriters were just coming out. I didn't know much about jobs and then I ended up at the Department of Veterans Affairs in that
Yep, we have another VA employee here.
in the loan guarantee department. So I saw veterans, I saw bankers, I saw realtors, and it was a fun job. And
Both things can be fun at the same time. You can love both. So as Loretta was telling me this part of her story, she was saying that she still loves to have people in her home, but sometimes there's so many new faces around, it's hard to keep track of them. So I would like to make this, Loretta, I told Loretta about this. I'm not pulling a Dick and just springing this on her. She said that she would like to extend an open invitation for you to come and have a meal with her at her home. So just come up and introduce yourself. I've heard she makes a mean roast. I had the garlic chicken when I was at your house the last time, I think. So I haven't had the roast yet, but I've heard that she makes a great roast. So if you would like to have a meal at the Walquist home, consider this your open invitation to come and join Loretta for a meal. And they have toys for little kids too. Those came out the last time we were over too.
we do, I saved them.
Yeah, it's a good move. Okay, so Dick's dad, George, told you to find a church and then find a home because you'll always find a way to make it to work. I thought that was very wise of him to say that. So it sounds like church was an important place for them and for you and Dick. So tell us about some of the ways that you all served here at Waite Park over the years.
Well, we love to sing, so Dick and I always sang together.
I think we have a picture of Dick leading. There we go. There's Dick leading some singing.
Oh, we're practicing. We did have a choir.
Yep. But you and Dick sang together too.
We did. Mm-hmm. And I taught Sunday school for years.
Got a picture of that too. Loretta teaching
Where did
Sunday
you get these pictures?
That church basement has it's a treasure trove. Look at that, Loretta teaching Sunday school back in the day.
That's pretty long ago.
So you guys helped in all kinds of areas around the church. It seems like there wasn't much that you guys weren't involved in.
Dick was involved with district board meeting and college board for some time, and we just served wherever it was needed. And you know, when we were going to church, there was a Sunday morning service, there was a Sunday evening service, there was a Wednesday service, and I know that my kids said, do we have to go again? And we had a lot of rules in our house also, but you know, I have the best 4 girls that anybody could have.
We all agree. All right, so in 2011, life took a bit of an unexpected turn with Dick's diagnosis. So tell us a little bit more about that time in your life and what you learned about God through your season of caregiving.
Well, Dick came home one day and he said, I think I have Parkinson's. And so that started the journey. That was in 2011. And in 2021, Dick passed away. And Parkinson's, I was his caregiver, and I said, I will never put him in a home. I want him to die at our own home, but it just didn't happen. So for about 6 months, he was in a memory care unit, and that was during COVID. So God really had to give me strength, and my family helped, but it was really hard. And he finally, everything, he couldn't even brush his teeth, he couldn't do anything, and it was so hard. So we put him in a memory care, and he died at the hospital, and I think he made his 80th birthday, that was May of 2020, or March 9th, and he died on March 11th. And it's been really, I'm still not over it, I don't think, and sometimes I have a good cry when nobody's around, and I see people walking hand in hand, a husband and wife walking in hand, or going on vacation, having fun together. That's when the memory comes back, because Dick and I were always together. We had our own jobs at the church, so we weren't side by side all the time, but we always went everywhere together. But I keep telling myself, and God has helped me, that I'm not the first one that has gone through this. And God will help me, and he has. He's put smiles on my faces, he's made things happen that are good. And Dick, he was a realtor, he's bought property for investors, and it was commercial and industrial real estate. And he left me very well taken care of. So I'm really thankful. One day he said, I've been investing for other people for a long time, but it's time that we start putting something away for us. And so, but I sold my last building, and God has been good. And I've been able to give to others. God is really great. I would encourage you to keep growing in the love of Jesus, because whatever happens, and we'll all go through trials, if we have God by our side, it helps.
I think for those of us who have made Waite Park our home, we all kind of have a moment or a thing that kind of solidified that this is the place that we're supposed to be. And one of those for me was at a prayer meeting in 2019. It was a great one where just more and more people kept showing up, and we had to keep adding chairs to this prayer meeting. But we were following the ACT structure: adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. And normally when you're doing that, whoever's leading a prayer meeting just says, leave this time quiet, and you can quietly confess before the Lord, because most people don't want to confess their sin in front of other people. But what struck me was that in this moment of quiet, you, Loretta, tearfully prayed and confessed to God how hard your season was right then, and how hard it was to be a caregiver, and asking God to help. And I was just so struck that in this moment where most people try to hide what hurts, Loretta brought that to God in that prayer meeting. And that meant so much to me, to know that this was a place where I could do that, where I could be vulnerable before God and before my church family. So I know only a small part of how hard that season was for you, but I'm so grateful that you continued to look to Jesus, and every time you pray or come before us here at Waite Park Church, you are doing that as well. You are reminding us of the goodness of God. You are reminding us to continually turn to him, and we are grateful for that. So on behalf of Waite Park Church, I want to thank you for the many, many years that you have served Jesus and the people here at this church. You are an example. Loretta doesn't know I was going to say all of this. Otherwise, she probably wouldn't have admitted to coming up here. But you are an example of faithfulness in your prayers and in your love for Jesus. And it both has and will continue to bear fruit.
There's something I didn't tell you about my family. And it is important because it affected the family and me. I had a sister, and this is in my family because I didn't know much about this until my sister was diagnosed as bipolar, And another thing I didn't say is that when we had started having children, Dick said, we're going to go every Thanksgiving back to Scottsbluff so that your mother and dad can know their grandchildren. So we would go back and forth every Thanksgiving and be with my mom and dad for maybe it was a week, I don't know. But my sister, later, this is my younger sister, was diagnosed with bipolar. And there was an incident, I don't know, I used to babysit her and I had no idea that she was so difficult because I think she had this from birth and it just kept escalating, but there was an incident with her where she came home from shopping with my mom and I don't know what happened. I was not there at the time. I was here in Minnesota, but she attacked my mother. They went shopping together, and when we got to the house, she attacked my mother, and actually, she almost killed her.
Oh my goodness.
She had an incident. I think the devil was talking to her. She was having hallucinations and thought my mother was Satan, but my mom would not charge her. So it was mandatory that she go to the hospital and get medication, and they finally found out what would help her, and she lived quite a few years after that, but she has passed away. So I've lost one sister. I have another brother that was into drugs and alcohol. I'm surprised he is still alive, but he is in Oklahoma. He's a precious person, and I think he feels he knows God, and God is part of him, but, and I'm glad I'm not the judge, because God, it's up to God. He believes in God, and I think, and then and all of them have had boys. I was the only one that had girls, and they've all three been divorced. You know, I'm just so thankful for that time when I went to the Wesleyan Church as I was a young person, and the things that have happened since then, because I know it's a God thing, and God had me in mind, and each step was in his plan. And I'm so glad that, you know, we've had a stable family, and God has been a part of our home forever.
It strikes me, Loretta, that there are some people that grow up in homes that they would call very boring, very normal, went to church all the time, and they just kind of follow in the path of their family. But it strikes me that it seems like God has been tugging on your heart from a very young age, and despite some of your background, you responded to that call and have responded with faithfulness. And so I think that should be a testimony to all of us that no matter where you come from, no matter what your past has looked like, there's a new story that's available for you.
Oh, there's another thing I want you to know about me. Dick had a couple cousins, and one of the cousins was having trouble in her marriage. So she talked to this other cousin, and this other cousin said, well, why don't you talk to Dick? He would have some good advice for you. And you know what she said? Oh, no, I can't do that because they're so perfect. But I want you to know, we were not a perfect family. We had times when, we were going at each other. Like every family, we were normal and had struggles. And there's probably more I could tell you, but...
I'm sure there is. Well, our scripture reading from this morning came from Philippians chapter 4, and at the end of it, it concludes with verse 9, and it reminded me of you, Loretta. I'm sure you wouldn't call yourself the Apostle Paul, but I think that we can take the same words for Loretta's life. And so if there's anything that you've learned or received or heard from Loretta or seen in her that is reflective of Jesus, put that into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Jesus, we thank you for this time to hear yet another testimony of your work in the life of someone so dear to us. We thank you for the years and years that Loretta has given to you and given to the church. We thank you for her faithfulness. And so I pray that would stir in us a desire to faithfulness as well. Thank you for the gift that she is and the gift of all of our testimonies that we get to share in how you have been at work in our lives. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.